Distracted, the secretary was suddenly kissed by a powerful millionaire and her world shifted. Hello everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It's quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, let's return to our main character. Emily Carter had learned to measure her life in quiet minutes stolen after everyone else had gone home. The glow of her monitor reflecting off the glass walls of the executive floor as Manhattan hummed far below, a city that never noticed secretaries staying late. She was the last light on most nights, correcting decimals, aligning charts, double-checking footnotes because mistakes traveled faster when they wore her name. Emily was good at being invisible. She knew the rhythm of cross-holdings by heart, the elevators that skipped floors, the coffee machine that sputtered after 8, the unspoken rule that the CEO's office door meant silence. Nathaniel Cross ruled this place with a calm that felt carved from stone, a man whose presence rearranged rooms without raising his voice. To Emily, he was schedules and signatures, a silhouette crossing glass, the weight of deadlines that pressed her shoulders but never crossed her mind. Tonight was supposed to be routine. A last-minute revision for a board deck due at 9 a.m., a typo hiding in plain sight, a breath held until the save icon flickered. She didn't hear him at first. The building had its own hush at this hour, a soft mechanical sigh. When she looked up, Nathaniel stood near the doorway, jacket draped over his arm, tie loosened, eyes fixed not on the screen but on the city outside, as if the skyline had asked him a question. "You're still here," he said, not accusing, not kind, simply stating whether. Emily nodded, fingers hovering over the keyboard. "I'll be done in 10 minutes. The words were automatic, professional, safe. She stood to hand him the folder, the distance between them closing with a precision that made her breath catch. Not fear, not desire, just awareness, the kind that comes when power enters a small space. Then it happened. Distracted by the glow of numbers and the quiet of the floor, by the closeness she had never measured before, Emily felt a brief, unexpected contact, a sudden kiss that lasted no longer than a heartbeat, startled and restrained, a human mistake in a world that pretended mistakes didn't exist. There was no lingering, no spectacle, only the shock of it, the way the room seemed to tilt as if gravity had been renegotiated. He pulled back immediately, as if realizing the line he had crossed at the same instant she did. Time stretched thin. Emily's first thought was not romance, but consequence, not feeling but fallout. Policies. Headlines. Her badge clipped to her blazer like an anchor. She tasted the metallic calm that came with knowing one wrong moment could rewrite years. Nathaniel's expression shifted, not anger, not hunger, but something quieter, an awareness that power does not excuse error. "Emily," he began, and stopped, as if words required permission. She stepped back, placing the folder on the desk between them like a boundary made of paper and ink. The city outside blinked, indifferent. In that pause, Emily felt her world shift, not because of a kiss, but because she understood, with sudden clarity, that the rules she lived by had been tested, and she would have to choose how the story moved forward. She squared her shoulders, steadying herself, returning to the version of herself that survived by clarity and courage, and met his gaze without apology or invitation, ready to claim her next breath on her own terms. Emily did not leave immediately. She stood there long enough for the moment to settle into memory, the kind that does not fade but sharpens. Then she gathered her things with deliberate care, slid her badge into place, and walked out without looking back. In the elevator, her reflection stared at her like a stranger who knew too much. She pressed the button for the lobby and counted the floors as they descended, a habit she had learned during years of quiet survival. 32, 31. Each number felt like a reminder of what she stood to lose. Emily was not reckless. She had grown up learning that stability was something you built inch by inch, not something you risked for impulse. Her father had worked 2 jobs until his hands ached. Her mother had measured groceries to the dollar, and Emily had promised herself she would never put her life at the mercy of someone else's mistake. This job was not just a title on a business card. It was health insurance, rent paid on time, a chance to send money home when the furnace broke in January. It was the difference between staying afloat and sinking quietly. Outside, the night air was cool, the city bright with possibility that rarely belonged to people like her. She walked 3 blocks before realizing her hands were shaking. Not from fear of him, but from the weight of what came next. Policies existed for a reason. She knew the handbook by heart, the sections about professional conduct, conflicts of interest, reporting channels. She also knew how stories traveled when power tilted the room. A secretary did not get the benefit of the doubt. A secretary got questions whispered, assumptions sharpened, a reputation trimmed down to a rumor that never quite let go. By the time she reached her apartment, a 4th-floor walk-up with a view of brick and fire escapes, her mind had drawn a clean map of consequences. Reported and become a headline in the office she loved for being invisible. Stay silent and carry a secret that did not belong to her. Either choice asked for something she had not planned to give. She slept little, waking before dawn to the sound of traffic and resolve. At 7:30, she was back at her desk, posture straight, coffee untouched, the board deck open and flawless. Work was a language she spoke without hesitation. When Nathaniel Cross arrived, the floor changed temperature. Conversations hushed. Shoes slowed. He moved past her desk and paused, his shadow stretching across the carpet like a question. "Emily," he said softly, careful. She looked up, eyes steady. "Good morning, Mr. Cross." Titles mattered today. He nodded once. A man accustomed to decisions that moved markets, now weighing words as if they carried cost. "We should talk. We can schedule time," she replied, already opening her calendar. The professionalism between them was not armor. It was a line she drew for herself. Throughout the morning, emails stacked, meetings rolled, and Emily did not miss a beat. She noted changes, flagged risks, saved the company money with a correction no one else had caught. If there was going to be a story told about her, she would make sure it started with competence. By noon, the office buzzed with anticipation for the afternoon board meeting, a public stage where narratives hardened into truth. Emily understood the stakes with a clarity that surprised her. This was not about a moment. It was about who controlled the meaning of it. When Nathaniel requested a private meeting after the board, she agreed, because fear had never been her currency. She straightened the stack of papers on her desk, clipped her badge, and chose calm over panic. Whatever came next would be decided not by whispers or power, but by the choice she made when the door closed and the room demanded honesty. The conference room was smaller than his office, intentionally neutral, glass walls frosted just enough to blur the outside world into shapes and motion. Emily arrived first, placing her notebook square with the table edge, aligning her pen parallel to the spine like a ritual that steadied her pulse. When Nathaniel Cross entered, he closed the door behind him without ceremony and remained standing, hands resting on the chair back as if distance itself were a form of respect. He did not begin with excuses. He did not soften the air with charm. "What happened should not have happened," he said, measured and clear. "I crossed a line." Emily listened, eyes level, noting how carefully he chose each word, how power learned restraint when it faced consequence. "I am prepared to take responsibility," he continued. "I want to understand what you need to feel protected." The word mattered. Protected meant structure, not sentiment. Emily opened her notebook. "I need clarity," she said, "and boundaries that do not depend on moods or timing." She spoke without heat, because heat invited misinterpretation. She laid out the rules she lived by, not demands but standards, the same ones that had kept her afloat. Professional distance, documented communication, meetings with doors open or third parties present, a written acknowledgement of what occurred, factual and contained, not a confession but a record. Her badge lay on the table between them, the plastic catching light, a reminder of what she represented and what she would not trade. Nathaniel nodded once. "Then Saturday, I will put it in writing," he said. "I will sign it." He slid a slim folder across the table. Inside were documents drafted overnight, precise and conservative, a memorandum acknowledging an inappropriate contact, a commitment to corrective protocols, a provision ensuring no retaliation, no reassignment without her consent, no change to compensation or role. There was also a non-disclosure agreement, optional, framed as protection for her privacy rather than silence. Emily read every line. She had learned early that small print carried large futures. "This does not buy my quiet," she said. "It protects my work." "Agreed," he replied. She felt the room settle, not into comfort, but into order. Order was something she trusted. She asked for one addition, a clause requiring external counsel review any deviation, and another stipulating training for executive leadership on power dynamics. The second request surprised him. He paused, then nodded. Done. The pen in her hand felt heavier than usual when she signed, not because she doubted the choice, but because she understood its weight. She did not sign the non-disclosure agreement. She set it aside. "I will decide later," she said. He accepted that without argument. As they stood, Emily gathered her notebook and slipped her badge back into place. The badge clicked, a small sound that felt like punctuation. At the door, Nathaniel spoke again, quieter. "I am sorry." She met his eyes, not softened, not hardened, simply honest. "I believe you," she said. "That does not change the rules." Outside, the office resumed its hum, screens glowing, calendars filling. Emily returned to her desk and sent a summary email documenting the meeting, concise and factual, CC to legal as agreed. She resumed work, correcting a line item that would save the company several $1,000s before the afternoon ended. The plan had been set, not a romance, not a threat, but a framework. Whatever came next would have to pass through it, tested not by intention but by action. The days that followed settled into a new pattern, quieter on the surface, sharper underneath. Emily noticed it first in the calendar, the way meetings were adjusted to include glass rooms and open doors, the way emails arrived copied carefully, language stripped of ambiguity. Nathaniel Cross honored the framework exactly as written. He did not test it. He did not lean on habit. If anything, he overcorrected, choosing distance even when efficiency invited closeness. Work filled the space between them, dense and demanding. A potential acquisition in the Midwest needed review, numbers cross-checked, against assumptions that looked clean but hid risk in logistics and labor. Emily built models late into the evening, converting estimates into realities measured in miles and hours, fuel costs, and overtime thresholds. She flagged a discrepancy that would have cost the company nearly $2 million over 18 months, a quiet save that did not announce itself. When she sent the memo, Nathaniel replied with a single-sentence copy to the deal team. Implement Emily Carter's recommendation immediately. No praise, no explanation, just action. It mattered more than compliments. In meetings, he deferred to her analysis, asking questions that sharpened conclusions rather than steering them. She answered with confidence earned, not borrowed. Colleagues began to notice the shift, not a scandal, but a recalibration. Emily was no longer just efficient. She was essential. The office learned to listen. Late one afternoon, a storm rolled in off the river, rain streaking the windows as traffic slowed below. Emily stayed, as she often did, reviewing a compliance update that required careful phrasing. Nathaniel requested time on her calendar for the following week, selecting a room labeled simply Conference B. She accepted without hesitation. Boundaries held because both sides held them. There was a strange steadiness in that, a trust built not on warmth but on reliability. At home, Emily felt the change too. She slept better, not because the tension was gone, but because it had been named and contained. She sent money to her parents without checking her balance twice. She bought groceries without calculating every dollar. Small freedoms, earned. One evening, as she packed up, she found the unsigned non-disclosure agreement still in her drawer, where she had placed it deliberately. She read it again, then returned it to its place. The choice was hers, and knowing that was enough for now. At the end of the week, the board approved the acquisition with conditions that mirrored her safeguards. The vote was unanimous. Afterward, as people filed out, Nathaniel caught her eye and gave a brief nod, the kind that acknowledged contribution without spectacle. She returned it, then turned back to her desk. The city outside shifted from gray to gold as the sun broke through the clouds, a reminder that change did not always announce itself loudly. Sometimes it arrived as a series of kept promises, a rhythm of work done well, a power recalibrated by restraint. Emily closed her laptop and clicked on her badge, feeling the weight of it settle comfortably against her blazer. The framework was holding. The work was speaking. Whatever else might try to enter this space would have to earn its place. measured not by impulse, but by consistency, not by words, but by the next decision made when it would have been easier not to choose at all. By the time autumn settled in, the office had learned a new cadence, one that ran on preparation and follow-through rather than proximity. Emily found herself working alongside Nathaniel more often, not closer, but in parallel, two lines moving toward the same outcome without crossing. They reviewed strategy in rooms with glass walls, voices low, documents shared across the table with deliberate pauses that allowed thinking to catch up. He asked questions that assumed her expertise, not her availability. She answered with precision, not performance. Trust grew the way concrete sets, slowly, by holding its shape under pressure. One night, a supply chain issue threatened the Midwest acquisition, a rail bottleneck that would ripple through costs and timelines. Emily stayed late to model alternatives, measuring routes in miles and hours, calculating the trade-offs between fuel surcharges and overtime caps. Nathaniel joined the session remotely from a different floor, his voice steady through the speaker, listening more than speaking. When she proposed a reroute that looked counterintuitive but held up under stress testing, he paused, then said, "Walk me through it again." She did, step by step, not rushing, confident the math would carry the argument. It did. He approved the plan and told operations to execute before sunrise. The next morning, the crisis dissolved into an update line that read resolved. No celebration followed, just relief and momentum. Over coffee later that week, taken in the open cafeteria during peak hours, they spoke about work in sentences that revealed values rather than vulnerabilities. He spoke of decisions that aged well only when they respected people down the chain. She spoke of growing up watching her parents make small sacrifices that never made headlines, but built something durable. There was warmth there, carefully contained, the kind that did not need to declare itself to be real. Emily noticed that when he disagreed, he did so openly, without dismissing her position. When she challenged an assumption in a leadership meeting, he invited the debate and accepted the revision publicly. The room adjusted, recalibrating around a new norm where authority made space instead of taking it. The unsigned agreement remained in her drawer, untouched, a quiet symbol of choice retained. Late on a Friday, after a week of 12-hour days, they crossed paths by the elevators. The city beyond the glass was washed clean by rain, lights smeared into gold and white. "You handled the vendor call well," he said, neutral and sincere. "So did you," she replied. The doors opened, and for a moment they stood with the option of silence or something else. Silence won, comfortably. Emily rode down alone, feeling not lonely but grounded. At home, she cooked dinner and called her mother, laughing about a small victory that did not require explanation. The world felt steadier, as if the framework she had insisted on was doing more than protecting her job. It was changing how power behaved around her. Back at the office the following Monday, a rumor brushed the edges of the floor and failed to stick. Work drowned it out. Results spoke. And in the space created by consistency, something unplanned but earned began to take shape. Not a secret, not a shortcut, but a connection that respected time, boundaries, and the quiet courage it took to choose integrity every day. The invitation arrived on heavy cardstock, embossed with the company crest and a date circled on every calendar that mattered. The annual leadership gala where donors, partners, and press converged under warm lights and polished speeches. Emily read it once and set it beside her keyboard, aware that public rooms tested private frameworks. The days leading up to it filled with rehearsals and briefings, talking points refined to inches, contingencies mapped. Emily prepared the CEO remarks with care, threading accountability through ambition, people through performance. On the evening itself, the venue hummed with expectation, glass clinking, cameras lifting as names were called. Emily wore a simple dress and her badge remained in her bag, replaced by an invitation that granted access without erasing who she was. She took her seat near the back, close enough to observe, far enough to breathe. Nathaniel moved through the room with practiced ease, greeting investors, acknowledging staff, his composure steady. When the program began, a panel took the stage to discuss governance and culture, questions designed to flatter until one did not. A moderator leaned forward and asked about leadership accountability in moments that test power, the kind of question that invited polish over truth. The The room stilled. Emily felt the familiar tightening that came before choice. Nathaniel did not deflect. He spoke of structures, of written commitments, of how leadership must submit itself to process when instinct falters. He acknowledged a past misstep without spectacle, describing corrective action and external oversight in language that made responsibility concrete. Murmurs rippled, not scandal, but recognition. When the moderator pressed, suggesting such transparency risked distraction, Nathaniel replied that trust cost less than repair. Cameras adjusted. The board members exchanged glances. Emily understood the stakes as they shifted in real time, reputation balanced against principle. After the panel, during the reception, a senior investor approached Emily, mistaking proximity for permission. "You must be very influential," he said lightly. Emily met his gaze and smiled, measured. "I am accountable," she replied. "It works." The comment landed clean. Later, as conversation swirled, a board member pulled Nathaniel aside, concern etched beneath cordiality. Emily watched from across the room, not intruding, trusting the framework to hold. Minutes later, Nathaniel returned to the microphone to introduce the operations team, naming contributors by role, including hers, crediting analysis that saved resources and protected workers down the chain. The applause that followed was brief and professional enough. Emily felt no rush, only a quiet alignment, public acknowledgement without indebtedness. When the evening ended, she stepped outside into cool air, the city reflecting itself in the river. Nathaniel joined her at a respectful distance. "Thank you for holding the line," he said. "For all of us." She nodded. Lines hold when they are shared. Inside, the gala wound down, headlines drafted with restraint. The test had not been about affection or absolution, but about choosing consistency under lights designed to reward performance. Emily walked toward the subway with steady steps, knowing that what mattered had been said where it counted, and that whatever came next would have to pass the same test, not once, but again and again. The week after the gala felt different, not louder but tighter, as if the air itself had learned to listen. Emily sensed it in the emails that arrived carefully worded, in the glances that lingered a second too long before returning to screens. Transparency had done its work, but it had also invited scrutiny. A compliance review expanded beyond schedule, an audit committee requested interviews, and the press framed questions with polite edges. Emily kept moving, anchoring herself in tasks that could be finished and checked off, because momentum was a form of defense. Nathaniel maintained distance, honoring the framework even as pressure mounted. When he asked for time, it was through calendar blocks and open rooms, never spontaneous, never private. Still, the weight of attention found Emily in quieter ways. A colleague she trusted pulled her aside, voice low, caution threaded through concern. "People are watching you," she said. "Not to help." Emily nodded. She had expected this phase, the one where a story tried to simplify her into a role that fit someone else's comfort. That afternoon, an article circulated online, balanced but suggestive, praising leadership reforms while speculating about catalysts. Emily read it once and closed the tab. Speculation was a tax she had not agreed to pay. By evening, an email from legal requested her availability for a voluntary interview, language precise, tone neutral. She accepted and prepared, documenting facts without color. When the interview ended, courteous and contained, she returned to her desk to find a message from Nathaniel requesting a brief conversation. She declined and proposed a later date with counsel present. The decision was not punitive. It was protective. The next morning, she arrived early, packed her desk with the efficiency of someone who had learned to leave rooms intact. She drafted a letter requesting a temporary reassignment to a project team with minimal visibility, a move that preserved her work while removing her from the narrative center. She sent it to Human Resources and Legal, CC to Nathaniel, language steady. The response came quickly, approval granted, timeline defined. When Nathaniel saw her in the corridor, surprise flickered and settled into understanding. "You do not have to do this," he said, careful. "I know," she replied, "but I choose it." They stood a respectful distance apart, the hum of the building filling the space where words might have complicated things. "I will support whatever you decide," he said. "Then do," she answered, without softness or steel, just clarity. The project team welcomed her without ceremony, grateful for her precision. Days filled with travel plans and spreadsheets, miles mapped, hours converted, work that moved the needle without moving headlines. Emily felt lighter, not because she was running, but because she had claimed her terms again. One evening, as she left the building, she passed the glass wall that once reflected her late nights. She paused, not in regret, but in recognition. This was what choosing herself looked like. Somewhere above, decisions continued, markets shifted, and reputations adjusted. Emily walked toward the subway with her shoulders squared, knowing that stepping back was not a loss but a boundary enforced, a necessary break in a story that refused to rush toward an ending that had not been earned. The reassignment did what it was meant to do, lowering the temperature while preserving the work, but it also revealed what consistency looked like when no one was watching. Over the next month, Emily watched from a careful distance as policies became practice across the company, not as announcements, but as quiet changes that held even when they slowed decisions. Nathaniel did not reach out beyond what process allowed, yet his actions traveled. An independent ombuds office launched with real authority and budget, reporting lines redrawn so accountability did not bottleneck at charisma. Mandatory leadership training rolled out without exceptions, including for him, scheduled during hours that cost him time rather than saving face. A compensation review corrected inequities that had lingered unnoticed, the adjustments announced without fanfare. Emily learned about these shifts the way most people did, through memos and outcomes, not private conversations. On a cold Tuesday morning, legal sent a notice closing the expanded review with no findings beyond those already addressed. The news landed softly, like snow that muffles sound. That afternoon, Human Resources requested a meeting to discuss her return options. Emily listened, asked questions, and declined urgency. She chose to visit a site instead, a distribution hub 300 miles away where her project team had rerouted operations. She walked the floor, spoke with supervisors, measured improvements in minutes saved and injuries avoided, tangible proof that good structure protected real people. When she returned, an envelope waited on her desk, not sealed with ceremony, just her name printed plainly. Inside was a letter from the board chair, brief and formal, acknowledging her contributions and offering her a newly created role focused on governance analytics, reporting directly to the audit committee, independent of the executive office. It was an offer built of distance and trust, not proximity. She set it aside to think. That evening, as she packed up, Nathaniel appeared in the corridor, stopping well short of her space. "I will not ask," he said, "but I want you to know this was not designed to bring you closer to me." She met his gaze, measuring the truth not by tone, but by alignment. "I know," she replied. "That is why I am considering it." He nodded, relief flickering and settling into resolve. "Whatever you choose," he said, "I will make sure the work holds." Days passed. Emily reviewed the offer against her values, her family's needs, her appetite for visibility. She accepted with conditions that preserved independence and sunset clauses that forced renewal by merit. The board agreed. On her first day in the new role, she walked past the glass walls with a different purpose, badge clipped, spine straight. Later that week, a company-wide note announced the changes, credit shared broadly, names included where it mattered. There was no spotlight on her past, only a path forward. As for Nathaniel, he kept his distance, and in doing so, proved something larger than apology. When he spoke to her in meetings, it was with the same respect he offered any leader whose analysis shaped outcomes. When he disagreed, he said so plainly and listened longer. The gesture was not a bouquet or a promise whispered out of turn. It was a system changed, sustained, and willing to cost him. Emily chose to stay, not because of him, but because the work now matched her terms. And in that choice, something settled into place, not a romance rushed, but a partnership with the future, earned one consistent decision at a time. Spring arrived without announcement, the river thawing into motion as the city relearned its own pace, and with it came a steadiness that felt earned rather than borrowed. Emily settled into her role with the audit committee, days measured by evidence and outcomes, not proximity or rumor. She traveled when the work demanded it, returning with reports that translated policy into protection, minutes saved, injuries avoided, trust restored. The company adjusted around the changes like a structure that had found its load-bearing points, quieter, stronger. Nathaniel continued to lead under the same rules he had helped codify, submitting decisions to review, inviting dissent early, accepting constraint as a feature rather than a flaw. They met in rooms designed for transparency, calendars open, agendas shared. When they spoke, it was about work first, always. And yet something else grew in the margins, not hidden, not hurried, a mutual regard shaped by patience. Months passed before either named it. The moment came not at a gala or under lights, but on an ordinary afternoon when a governance review concluded with unanimous approval. As people filed out, Emily lingered to gather her notes. Nathaniel waited at a respectful distance, then asked, simply, if she would like to walk a block before heading separate ways. She considered the request as she always did, weighing context and consent, then nodded. Outside, the air was warm, the city loud in the way that meant life was moving forward. They spoke about nothing urgent, a neighborhood cafe reopening, a book she had read on systems that failed, and the people who fixed them. When the conversation edged toward what had never been discussed, it did so gently. If there were a different chapter, he said, careful to leave space, it would have to start where there is no imbalance. Emily stopped, turned to face him, and answered with the clarity that had guided her all along. Then it starts with time, she said, and with choice that can be withdrawn. He accepted that without negotiation. Over the weeks that followed, time did its work. They met publicly, openly, never alone behind closed doors, letting familiarity grow under daylight. Emily kept her independence intact, her reporting line unchanged. Nathaniel kept his distance where distance protected integrity. When they disagreed, they said so. When one needed space, it was granted without question. The city watched nothing because there was nothing to watch. Results continued to speak. On a quiet evening, months later, they stood on a bridge as traffic flowed beneath, the skyline reflected in water that no longer froze the same way. Nathaniel spoke of commitment not as possession but as partnership, of choosing accountability even when it cost comfort. Emily listened, not swept, not skeptical, simply present. She agreed to try, on terms they wrote together, with check-ins and exits defined, romance allowed to grow without eclipsing the work that had brought them here. The choice felt less like a leap and more like a step onto solid ground. In the end, her world had shifted, not because someone powerful reached for her, but because she insisted on structure, earned respect, and chose what came next. The city kept moving, companies kept changing, and Emily walked forward with her name intact, her boundaries honored, and a future shaped by decisions she owned.